This is from Mark MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I congratulate Miles Briggs as a fellow Deputy Convener of the Palliative Care CPG on bringing this debate to the Chamber. It's an issue that I have a very strong interest in, and he's right that it might not be a cheery subject, but it is a necessary subject. It deals with life's greatest certainty, the fact that it will end. And while we have no say on how we come into the world, we should, and I believe we should, strive to afford as much agency as possible to individuals to decide on how and where they leave it. Miles Briggs spoke of the pressures faced by frontline health professionals. It's a debate that often occurs in this Parliament across a range of areas. One of the pieces of work which I found while looking into things ahead of this debate was an evaluation of the Marie Curie nursing service in England, which found evidence of lower total care costs for someone receiving that service compared to a similar individual in receipt of usual end-of-life care, identified around £500 per person of healthcare savings, which could, if you extrapolate from the figures, result in potentially £4.2 million worth of annual savings in Scotland, money that could then be redirected. And there is promising evidence that palliative care interventions are, in and of themselves, cost-effective, but also have improved outcomes, such as reduced symptom burden and an increase in people dying in their preferred place, but also could result in reductions in acute care costs and acute care pressures as a consequence. One of the issues that I think needs to be wrestled with in relation to the issues that have been highlighted in this debate is data, and ensuring that there is good data available to drive the policy decisions that are made. If we look again at the National Survey of Bereaved People in England, contributes a considerable amount of evidence which was used in a review conducted by the London School of Economics and Marie Curie. However, no similar survey is undertaken in Wales, Northern Ireland or Scotland, which potentially presents gaps in evidence bases for the devolved nations. I wonder whether the Minister has given any consideration to perhaps seeking to have that survey extended into Scotland, or potentially conducting a survey of our own here in Scotland in order to capture some of that rich data that could be used to improve service provision. Similarly, the minimum data set for specialist palliative care services was another important source of data for that LSE Marie Curie review. However, it only provides data across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. No similar data is available currently in Scotland. So again, one of the questions I've asked the Minister recently is around the Scottish Research Forum for Palliative and End-of-Life Care, which hasn't met now since early 2018. And while he said to me that he hopes that it will meet early in 2020, I'd be grateful if he was able to update the Chamber in relation to that, because it's important that the research in relation to palliative care keeps pace and drives the sort of improvements in terms of care that we would want to see to meet the aspirations that have been highlighted in the Marie Curie research. The final issue I want to highlight, and perhaps bring a couple of examples from my own constituency caseload, is around the role of carers, and not just those paid for carers, but also those members of the family who take up the caring role. A review, the LSE review, highlighted that having a carer who lived with a patient was the single most important factor associated with home death, whereas living alone or being unmarried increased the likelihood of a hospital death. Now, the number of over 70s living on their own is projected to increase significantly, which could then lead to pressure on community services and increase the number of people dying in hospital or care home settings. Two constituent cases which I just want to highlight, Presiding Officer, both of which relate to individuals with motor neurone disease. The first, H, was admitted to hospital at the age of 81 for a PEG procedure due to unsafe swallow, and was ready to return home for several weeks. Family were receiving support and advice from MND Scotland. However, due to difficulty sourcing care providers in the area, the suitable package was not able to be delivered, and as a result, the patient became too weak and frail to get home and died in the hospital setting. The second constituent, Olive Maver, who I spoke to her husband, and he gave permission for me to mention her case in the Chamber today, was admitted to hospital again for a PEG procedure, but deteriorated, requiring a full body hoist and breathing support. She remained in an acute ward for 8 weeks, despite being deemed medically fit for discharge due to a lack of carers being available to allow her to return home. It was only as a result of her husband agreeing to take on one of the caring roles alongside the carer being provided by a Health and Social Care Partnership that enabled her to be able to return home and to die at home. And the contrast between those, where one individual did not have somebody to fulfil that role at home and thus died in hospital, but another individual, simply through the fact that they had somebody at home who was willing to fulfil that role, is, I think, an inequity that needs to be addressed, and we need to ensure that we have the services available so that if people wish to leave the hospital setting and to die at home surrounded by family and loved ones, the services are in place to enable them to do so.